Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch brought to you by the Baker Street Irregulars. I'm your host, Steve Doyle. You know, our Sherlockian community is a wonderful thing. It affords us the opportunity to meet people and go places and experience things that in our regular walk, we never would. And it is the Sherlockian community that has put, speaking personally now, put me in touch with every walk of life, and including our guest today. I'm very happy that we're going to be talking to Curtis Armstrong, actor, television actor, stage actor, familiar face to many people, and also a Sherlockian. Hello, Curtis. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you, Stephen?
I'm great. It's good to see you.
Likewise.
Good to see you holding up under the strain of the times that we are in.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it is a challenge. On the other hand, I have had more time to read than I can remember in my adult life, which has advantages, but it has been it's been a challenge.
It has been. That was one of the motivations for starting this podcast was I think we were just all missing each other, and it wasn't my idea, but somebody said we should do a thing where we can actually talk to people and other people can share it. So
I think it's a wonderful idea. I really do. I miss all of my Sherlockian friends from everywhere. And, I think about it, obviously when the various groups announced their move to virtual meetings, I just went, oh, God. It's the missing of the people, that engagement, which is it's sad. I mean, there are many reasons to be unhappy about what's going on, but certainly that annual or biannual, chance to meet with people and just spend a few days with them is a delight. And I'm sorry it's not happening this year, but we have these alternatives. So
right, we're here now, and that's a good thing. So, right. So Curtis, let me ask. I'm just going to start with, like I do with a lot of people out here. So, where are you? Where do you live? Where are you coming to us from?
I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California, and it's actually an area of Los Angeles called Los Feliz, and it's right on Griffith Park. So Griffith Park is our big urban park here.
Whenever I think of Griffith Park, I think of Rebel Without a Cause. Is that am I getting the right?
Oh, Rebel Without a Cause, yeah. Well, that's where the observatory is. Yeah. The Griffith Park Observatory is right over just a few blocks from here, and that's where they shot those memorable scenes from Rebel Without a Cause. In fact, they've got of all of the things to have at an observatory, they have a statue of James Dean. I think people come there for the Rebel Without a Cause tour as much as they do to see the stars.
I'm on my James Dean pilgrimage, but I'll go look at the stars too.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you, as I mentioned in our introduction, you are a professional working actor, and with a long career. I knew of you before I knew you, and I remember the first time I met you. I'm sure you do not remember it, but I do. I remember it was at the National Arts Club in in New York City, and it was that Saturday afternoon cocktail party, and actually it was Mark Gagan who spotted you first and said, "I think that guys been on TV.
I remember.
And
Yeah.
so, and I went up, and I remember doing this. I remember going up and going, "Excuse me, were you on Moonlighting?"
Well, the funny thing about that was because I had been invited to that by Susan Rice, and Susan had been my Sherlockian mentor years and years before in Detroit, and so she had invited me to this, and I went there, and now the Baker Street Irregulars for me had been something that, it had been the thing that I had dreamed of. The idea of being at the Baker Street Irregulars weekend in any capacity for anything was one of my dreams. And so this was my first actual introduction to the physical, the corporeal beings whose names I already knew. And so for me, I went there expecting to meet all of these people, and not in a million years, and I'm not kidding, thinking that they would know me, because my idea of what Sherlockians were was, these people in, these ivory towers who would write books and articles and publish magazines and all of those things that would have nothing to do with the sort of stuff I did. And so I just assumed I was going to be like a fly on the wall. And then it turned out, of course, Moonlighting especially was a big thing at the time. So I wound up, or had been a big, I guess it was much
more recently, yes.
But people remembered it. So,
yeah.
But of course, then I wound up realizing they also knew, Revenge of the Nerds and all the other stuff. But I just never dreamed that they would lower themselves to actually watching the kinds of stuff I was doing at the time. I thought they would be too busy writing new books.
It was either an enormous relief or an enormous letdown. Which
no. Well, it was actually. It was both, because I didn't have to introduce myself that much to people, so it was really both. And in a way, I felt comfortable, but the probably the biggest jump was for them as a group to realize that I had sort of credentials. And wasn't there just as a celebrity,
right,
sightseeing, literary sightseeing. So that was, and I think that took a while. It wasn't an immediate thing. They just assumed I was there because I was somebody who was well known and had been invited, not because I really was into Sherlock Holmes at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, but you had been in Sherlock Holmes for many, many years.
Yeah.
I very much enjoyed reading your autobiography.
Right.
Which is, I recommend to everybody, by the way. It's very entertaining. And you're quite forthcoming about your love of Sherlock Holmes and how you started early. Now, you didn't grow up in California. You mentioned that you are from the Midwest, from Michigan. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I was born and raised in Detroit, and then my father, who worked for Chrysler Corporation, was transferred overseas to Geneva, Switzerland. So I spent almost 4 years in Geneva, and it was while I was in Geneva that my father handed me one of his sort of ragtag collections of Sherlock Holmes stories. And interestingly, he had acquired the complete canon, but in 3 different editions. So one of them was the memorial edition from when Conan Doyle died, the black with red writing on it. And one of them was what they call the BSI edition, the the one with all of the introductions by famous people, Vincent Starrett and others.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one was like, I've checked it since, and it was some kind of pirate edition collection
There were many.
of Sherlock Holmes and other Doyle stories. And so it wasn't the complete, a uniform edition, but it was the complete story, the complete stories. So I was able to find them because there was so little to do in Geneva when you're 12. There's just not much to do in 1964, especially. We couldn't go to movies unless they were Disney movies and things like that. So I fell back on reading early and deeply, and Sherlock Holmes was one of the biggest.
It's really interesting. So then you end up back in Detroit.
Right, in 67, summer of 67.
Yeah, wow. And so, so at what point did you, so you're already kind of under the spell of Sherlock
Right.
Holmes, but many of us fall under the spell without actually even knowing there are other Sherlockians out there. So how'd you cross that bridge?
It was a big, it was a very small event. But I would go to school with Sherlock Holmes books by that time I had my own, and they were recognizable as Sherlock Holmes books. And my civics teacher was a fellow named Barry Lepler. And Barry Lepler would see me with Sherlock Holmes books. And one day he said to me, after class, he said, I've noticed that you seem to like Sherlock Holmes a lot. I said, oh, yeah. He said, have you ever heard of the annotated Sherlock Holmes? And I said, no. And he said, well, I got it as an extra for joining the Book of the Month Club. And I just thought you might like to have a look at it. And so the next day he comes in with the 2 massive volumes. And that was, came the dawn. That was when I realized not only, everything about the Baker Street Irregulars, everything about the pastiches, everything about all of these things, and then going through it and finding multiple references to the Baker Street Journal, and, curious as to whether the Baker Street Journal still existed, and, who of these people still lived. And I mean, it was
the whole thing.
Inspirational and mind-blowing that all of this existed without me knowing about it. So he then, when I have to, can I borrow this? I have to borrow this. And he said, I'll tell you what, he said, my Book of the Month Club was $5. You can buy it. So he gave me, he sold me his annotated Sherlock Holmes. I then somehow wound up finding out, obviously no internet or anything, but I found out how to subscribe to the Baker Street Journal. And in the Baker Street Journal, and this was several years later by that time, I'd subscribed to it for a while. And in 1970, I think, or 71, in the Zionist group at the end, what the club, what's happening with the clubs, was something about the foundation of a new group in Detroit, actually in about 15 minutes drive from my house in Bloomfield Hills, called the Trifling Monographs. And it was for students, founded by a teacher from the Kingswood School, who was Susan Rice. And that's how I got involved with organized Sherlockiana, and then also ultimately how I became friends with Susan Rice. And she, years later, after we'd not been in touch for many years, got in touch with me and invited me to come to New York. So that was how I did it.
I always love stories like that. First of all, how just a sort of a generous gift from a teacher like that. Think of that, how the course, how your life's course changed. Just by that. Here, that generous moment of, you can essentially just have this, and here, I will change your life with it.
Yes,
I mean, that
exactly right.
That always just, and 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 I mean, I'm grateful to your teacher, because you and I would very likely not be having this conversation today if it hadn't been for that moment. And that's really
No, and
that's really amazing to me.
I mean, in a lot of ways, he becomes responsible. I mean, he's directly responsible for my meeting Susan. Susan is directly responsible for me getting to know everyone else. And so it's he has, I've spent time with him since. When the book came out, I was doing a book tour and I was in Detroit, and he showed up at an event that I was having in Detroit. And of course, he has no recollection of it, because for him, it was a momentary thing. Here, I don't need these. You take them. It meant nothing to him.
I mean, that's a life lesson, though. You never know what.
You don't know what you're unleashing when you share things like that with students or young people, and that's why it's always been important to me as a person who loves books, loves music, to give presents like that to young people, because you don't know. I mean, it may sit never read or listened to, but there's always going to be one for whom it have life-changing possibilities.
It's really true. And I mean, I know it happens in all walks of life, but it does seem to happen to me at a pretty high level in our Sherlockian community. And I think it's a community that's extremely generous by nature and welcoming, and so when I hear a story like that, it's just affirming. It's a good.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So you became a Sherlockian in the summer of 67, 68, something like that?
66. 66 when I started reading the stories, and then 71 when I joined the monographs.
Got it. And then you began. You were in school to learn how to act, right? I mean, and. Right. And I love reading about that in your book. I'm also kind of amazed to know. I'm always amazed at the sort of the web of connections that we're all walking through without even aware of. You had I don't know if he was a teacher or was he an acting coach or the head of a theater, Terrence Kilburn.
Terry Kilburn, yeah.
Kilburn, right? So so tell us who Terry Kilburn is and what his Sherlockian connection is.
Well, Terry Kilburn was in the 30s, was a very famous child star in Hollywood. He was English, and he'd started in London, and then his mother brought him over to Hollywood, where he started a career on radio, actually, and then went from radio to cinema. And he's known for Sherlockians because he played the role of Billy, the wise and tactful page who worked at 221B, in the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, the first Fox movie, or I guess second. It was Hound of Baskerville Adventures, and he only appeared once, but because it was Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce. And because it was a significant, big budget release and remains watched and remembered even to today, his presence in it was significant. He was more well known for playing Tiny Tim in the original talkie, the Reginald Owen one, who I see on the wall back there, I believe.
You do. He's right back
there. And Reginald Owen, that version of Christmas Carol, and also as the boy in the Robert Donat Goodbye, Mr. Chips. He was the boy who says, "Goodbye, Mr. Chips." And
now I got to go back and watch it.
Yeah, and he was in a lot of movies. He was in Black Beauty. He was in a bunch of movies. And he sort of grew out of it as he got older and wound up becoming a director, stage director, and then wound up at Meadowbrook Theater, which was a regional theater outside of Detroit, professional regional company. And he had been there for years. And I studied acting at the same university where Meadowbrook was, Oakland University. And they wound up establishing an acting academy, a strict acting academy. It wasn't undergraduate stuff. It was separate from the university. And they were connected sort of with Meadowbrook. Terry was on the board of the academy, in addition to being artistic director at Meadowbrook. So when I went through my 2 years at the academy, I came out of it in 75. And Terry, at the end of that summer, I'd gone off to form my own theater company in Ann Arbor and wasn't thinking about Meadowbrook Theater in any way. And Terry got in touch with me because he was casting Midsummer Night's Dream for the following season and wanted me to play Puck. And this would be my first professional job. And so I was able to join the union and work with Terry, which started a long relationship, which continues to this day. Terry is still going in Minneapolis.
He's amazing. I remember at the it was at one of the Minnesota conferences.
Yeah.
2 or 3 back, something like that. I remember I'd been trying to track him down because I'm always interested in interviewing Sherlockian actors, especially from, there aren't many left from that era.
Very few, if any.
Yeah. And I was thinking perhaps he could come to Gillette to Brett, something. Wasn't sure. And I had and Julie McCurris. I figured out that he was in Minneapolis, and she helped track him down. And he said, well, he wrote me a very nice letter. I'm really too old to travel, but I look forward to meeting you. And then he ended up going to just across town to the Minnesota Library.
Yeah.
So I got to meet him then. And I remember sitting at this table going and thinking, I'm sitting here next to Terrence Kilburn, and on the other side of him is Curtis Armstrong. I'm like, what weird alleyway did I turn down?
Oh, I know. It was a weird thing. What was even stranger, my recollection is, Julie can confirm it, but my recollection is what happened was Julie picked me up at the airport for me to come there. And she had told me that she had asked where I was staying. And I had said, well, I don't need to stay at the hotel because I'm staying with my friend. I'm staying with a friend. And he's a guy I used to work with, Terry Kilburn. And he said, Terry Kilburn?
I've been looking for him.
Trying to get in touch with Terry Kilburn. And
that's great.
Yeah, it was like everybody knew he was there, but nobody could persuade him to sort of come out of his burrow and actually engage about those things. I mean, he was very proud of his career. Yeah.
That is remarkable. Well,
his relationship with Sherlock, I'll get it, Basil Rathbone, continued into the 50s because he ultimately wound up doing that ill-starred.
Yes, he was in that play that lasted 3 days on Broadway.
Right.
Yes. Hey, Curtis, let's take a break for a moment so we can hear a brief message from our commercial sponsor.
Hi, my name is Bob Katz. I'm a member of the Baker Street Irregulars, and I'm the co-publisher of BSI Press, but more importantly, I'm a subscriber to the Baker Street Journal since 1973.
Hello, my name is Ralph Hall from Louisville, Kentucky. I am a member of the Baker Street Irregulars. I have subscribed to this journal I'm holding here before me, the Baker Street Journal, for 40 plus years.
Hi, I'm Monica Schmitz, and you should subscribe to the Baker Street Journal.
Hi, I'm Scott Monty from I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the website and podcast about the connection between Sherlock Holmes and popular culture. You know, the Baker Street Journal has been a wonderful sponsor of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere and Trifles, our companion podcast, for many years. And when you think about the connection between Sherlock Holmes and popular culture, the Baker Street Journal has always been there.
I have literally read every issue of the Baker Street Journal since the old series in 1946.
It's full of Sherlockian scholarship and humor. The artwork on the cover is wonderful.
People take their interest from today and imbue it into the Baker Street Journal in every single issue. And if you're not subscribing, you're missing out on some of the most fascinating and lively scholarship in the Sherlockian world today.
And basically, if you don't read the Baker Street Journal, I don't know why you're being a Sherlockian.
This is where it's at.
All right, we're back. So I want to also ask you about, I mean, there's so many things we could ask you about your film career and everything, but I want to, do you have a favorite Sherlockian memory, or maybe early, like going to your first Science Society meetings and what that was like? I always try to encourage people who are shy about taking that plunge, because I know it can be kind of intimidating sometimes, but what was it like when you first started doing that?
Well, it was easy. It was made easier because my introduction to it wasn't strictly. It wasn't BSI, obviously. It was a group that had been founded for students. So there were no older people there, except for Susan, who is all of 10 years older than I am, I think. I mean, it's not like it's dramatic, although at the time it seemed like a dramatic age difference.
I think the gap seems greater the younger you are.
Yeah, of course it is, yeah. And now there appears to be no gap at all. So, but at the time, it was exciting to have, in the first place, it was co-ed, which seemed completely natural to me coming from the theater background at school, because you were constantly working with girls and boys. Everybody was jammed in together, and there seemed to be no issue. And it wasn't for some time that after a number of meetings, one of the big sort of lightning bolts was Susan revealing that, you know, as great as it was to be able to talk Sherlock Holmes and be with people with the same interests, she would not be able to join the BSI because they didn't allow women. And, you know, I was raised in a very politically conservative family. It wasn't like I was raised by feminists, but I can remember the shock. I can remember the embarrassment. I remember flushing, my face flushing, because of course the implication is I would be able to, but she couldn't, even though she was the person who had managed to corral this group of young people and give them this opportunity. And it was deeply disappointing. And that was one of the first significant moments for me. It was realizing what the game plan was. In a way, ultimately, I became strongly feminist myself, and some of it I can relate back to that, which seems strange, but I really did. I think my feminism was to some degree inspired by the fact that women couldn't get into the Baker Street Irregulars at that time because of just the pure unfairness of it. It seemed bizarre.
Yes, and isn't it? It's kind of interesting to me how I think the BSI went co-ed close to, well, I mean, at least over 20 years ago now, right? I mean, it's been a long time now, and
I mean, long before I was involved with it, but yeah.
Yeah, it finally went co-ed.
Right.
and early 90s, I forget when, it's somewhere in there. And it's something that it's still a thing, you know? I mean, it's
Oh
not,
yeah, I know it is. I
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had encounters with a couple of guys who had been members of the Baker Street Irregulars who had stopped going because of that. And it was, you know, it's for people now. This gets back to what your original question was. I went off on a tangent, but your original question about the you know, the big moments that you have when you first get involved with organized Sherlockiana. And I was saying that with ours, it was, you know, relatively easy because we were all peers. When people, I don't know how people manage to go to the weekend and have their first, you know, be invited to their first cocktail party or their first, you know, dinner or something like that, and you see all of these people around you. That's an intimidating thing. And I understand people being shy about it, but it also makes it more incumbent on people like you and me to be open and welcoming, you know, and always make a point of introducing yourself if you can. Because it is an issue for people. They don't know how to behave, and they've heard so much stuff. You know,
It's not all accurate either, you know?
Huh?
And it's not all accurate.
No, it's not all accurate, but it is. You do get people who will say, well, you know, they're very elitist and they're very blah 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 blah, blah and so on. Once again, my introduction to it was colored by the fact that people already knew who I was, but I've also seen people respond to those who are you know, not in any way known, you know, and I see the welcoming, I see the friendliness, and I think it's very encouraging. You know, it's not done. You know, it's an evolution as everything is, but it is evolving.
And yeah, it is. I find that the you know, it's always kind of a charge, like when you're in New York, for instance, at the many events that are going on there,
Right.
and because there's far more than just that Friday night, you know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on anymore, and when there's a new face, you know, there's somebody new, and you're seeing them at repeated places, and you know I'm going to end up knowing that person, you know, and that's a wonderful thing. I mean, you just know that you're going to, you know, 2 years from now, I'm going to be standing there at this cocktail party having a laugh with that person, you know,
Right.
And that's
Exactly.
that's a wonderful thing. I mean, that's the good part of this thing, and I do try to be aware. I had mentors too, you know, when I got one, or I mean, it was my entry to New York was made easier by Roy Pilot,
Uh-huh.
and Dr. Al Roden, the late Al Roden, who basically took me under their wing. I didn't know anything, didn't know anybody, and yet they opened the doors for me, and I've tried to pay that forward, you know, as best you can. So
Yeah, that's
anyway.
all you can do. And the more of us, I feel like, maybe I'm being, I don't know. I feel like every year with a new influx of people into this organization, men and women into this organization, the more that becomes normal. And it might have been, for me, it was Susan Rice. I had known only by mail people like Steve Clarkson, you know,
Sure.
you know, Andy Page, people like that from the early 70s,
Mhm.
Sean Wright, you know, different people from around the country that I was writing letters back and forth,
Yes.
you know.
But you
And
still wrote wrote actual.
writing letters and sending them off, as we did. And and Steve, I remember Clarkson, I remember he had created, I've never seen another one. Maybe there are a bunch of them around. They were little, a little bust that he had made of Sherlock Holmes, the head, on a piece of wood. And I saw it advertised, I guess, in the Baker Street Journal. And I sent away for it. And I don't forget how much, $10 or something.
Uh-huh.
And it's still on my shelf in there. And that's from like 1971, something like that. So, and then once I got involved in the Baker Street Irregulars, I got involved with a lot of people outside of that weekend. One person leads to another person, and then you start going to other meetings in different places that you wouldn't have thought, like when you and I were at the one in Minneapolis, and Brett to Gillette, and all of those things. It just opens more and more doors, and you find more and more interesting people behind them. We're very lucky to have that outside of internet, as great as internet can be.
Exactly. It's true. It's sort of the human internet in a way.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your interest in Holmes specifically. Do as an actor, I mean, you probably heard this question before, but as an actor, does it make you interested in the dramatic interpretations of Holmes, or do you prefer books or?
Well, not. I mean, I went through phases, right? So with me, it was when in the starting around 73, when I started working. I started having a little more money, disposable income. I spent it all on books, and I had no taste at all. I would buy anything. If it had Sherlock Holmes on it, I would buy it. I was mentioning to you before we came on that I had a part of my collection was cinema. It didn't have that much to do with the fact that I was an actor, because at the time I wasn't in movies or anything. But it was just something else to collect about Sherlock Holmes. So I would collect movie stills, and there's a whole thing about that aspect of my collection, most of which I don't have anymore. I lent some of my Sherlock Holmes film still collection to the Sherlock Holmes pub in London in the mid 70s, because in those days that pub had 2 glass cases. They may still be there, but in the main saloon, in the main pub there were these 2 glass cases, and one of them was empty, and the other one had like T-shirts for the short, their merch at the time, which wasn't much, and but it just empty in this room that was filled with memorabilia. But all of the memorabilia in the room at that time, most of which I guess is gone now. At that time, it was all stuff from that Festival of Britain event in '51, and essentially from the Doyle estate. So they had nothing later. They had no pictures, for example, from Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, which was massive for me. That movie, I still watch that movie. They had nothing from. I don't think they had anything from Study in Terror. I don't think they had anything from They Might Be Giants, which was another big one for me. And so I talked to the guy at the pub, and I said, I've got these later things. They're not represented here. Would you like to borrow them? I mean, I could lend them to the pub. And he said, well, yeah, we could put them up there. Sure, yeah, bring them in. So I went in the following Sunday morning, like at 9 a.m, before the pub was open. And they let me in, and I was able to go up and put all of these film stills up. And they were there for years. And I mean, on loan, they were there. When I say years, maybe 2 years. I don't remember. But then there was a stretch of time where I wasn't going to London as often. So I don't know when it happened, but sometime later, some years later, I came back and they were gone. And I said, what happened to the pictures? So naive. Oh, we were going to keep them there until the end of the world.
Yeah.
And,
and then return them to me at the end of time.
And then return them to me with thanks and a free beer. Awesome.
Yeah.
And but they'd been, there'd been new people taking over, and they just took them down and threw them away, probably. But those were the kinds of things that, because I was obsessive about Sherlock Holmes, I would just say, oh, I need to have all of these things because it's about Sherlock Holmes. And it's all I spent my money on was books and records and things like that of Sherlock Holmes.
I'm more interested in collecting experiences now.
Yeah. It's valuable.
My fellow Sherlockians, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of go back to you personally. So you're working, right? I remember you were saying you're doing some voice work and stuff. How difficult is it to work in this?
Yeah. Well, at the moment, there's basically no production. I mean, I saw something the other day that LA production dropped off 98%, meaning there's essentially no production at all, except maybe there's some up in Canada. And
the animators are working probably.
I mean, there are places where things are being made, and things are sort of starting to happen now. But since the lockdown, since March, or really February, March, I've been doing voiceover exclusively, and I couldn't even do that the way I used to do it. I was doing American Dad, and I was doing for Fox, and then Disney. I was working for Disney, Monsters at Work, which is their Monsters Inc. thing, and a Nickelodeon one, Loud House, and I'm doing one right after I get off with you here, which is yet another one. And what I've had to do is convert my linen closet into a studio. So the different studios will send me, a microphone and all of that stuff, and they all have different gear. They've all got different things. So I have to get them all hooked up into my computer, and then I sit in in this linen closet with no air for 3 hours and do whatever it is that I'm doing. That has been the extent of my work since March.
Hence the reading.
Exactly, yeah. That's right.
Well, Curtis, believe it or not, we are just about at our limit of time here.
Okay.
So we're going to wrap up. Is there, I look forward to seeing you again in person soon. I have very fond memories of you coming to Gillette to Brett. I remember that was what you said. That was one of the first times. Am I remembering this correctly? One of the first times you spoke publicly about Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah. Maybe the first.
Yeah.
I think the Gillette to Brett was after the one in Minneapolis, the Anderson Library one.
I think it was.
I
think that's true.
So, Anderson, I think, was first, and but then that was Sherlock Holmes on acting, I think, at the Anderson, and but then you invited me to that. It was one of the first times that I'd gone out to actually do a serious. So
it was very serious. It was great. I do remember it fondly. And anyway, I just want to say thanks. And it was nice having a visit with you.
I loved it. I really appreciated it because it's nice to be able to talk to somebody who I know and who, I mean, I'm not unfamiliar with with podcasts, but it's usually with people I don't know. And, we have a history. So
Right, exactly.
It's been great. It's been really great. I've enjoyed it.
Well, great. Well, take care, and we will sooner than later, I hope. We'll see.
Sure.
We'll have a personal visit.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Curtis.
You bet. Bye.
And that's it for this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch. I want to thank everybody again for your kind feedback and words regarding the show. Everybody's so generous, and it's encouraging that the show seems to be meeting a need out there. It's very grateful. We're very grateful here. You can post your comments or suggestions anywhere that you see the show. We post it across a large number of Sherlockian Facebook pages, and of course they're on our YouTube channel. And wherever you see it, and if you want to leave a comment, we'll find it there, and we'll read it. So I want to encourage you all to do that. I also want to encourage you to come back in 2 weeks, because our next episode will feature an interview with the one and only Otto Penzler of the Mysterious Bookshop. Until then, take care, and we'll see you then.